In 2001, Croteam struck gold with Serious Sam: The First Encounter, and soon after a deal was established with Global Star Software, a subsidiary of Take-Two Interactive. This led to Climax Studios, yes that one, being granted the rights to produce 2 Serious Sam games, while in the meantime Croteam was putting the finishing touches on the second encounter, followed by a next-generation Sam game. Climax's efforts were both released on the same day, April 14, 2004. One was Serious Sam Advance, an interesting adaptation that gives us an idea of what Serious Sam could have looked like had it been a 2.5D shooter released back in the early 1990s. And that's as far as my praise goes. Due to imprecise controls and single-digit frame rates, its fundamental playability was severely compromised. But the second was Serious Sam: Next Encounter, released for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube. It was a successor to the classic Encounters, inheriting their visual style and core gameplay while introducing a couple of its own ideas. And for the most part, it achieves its goals, quite competently at that. Sadly, the game never got ported to PC, so I am playing the GameCube version here, running on the Dolphin emulator. The story begins with some little gremlin being warned not to mess with Mental's time lock, right before jumping into it, of course. Sam is then called by Dr. Coomer, who informs him that weird things are happening to the space-time continuum, and they want Sam to investigate the situation in ancient Rome. After a short warm-up at the Colosseum, the scientist tells him that there has been an error, resulting in him getting teleported somewhere else. Much to Sam's disappointment, the cool gun is no more, and he now has to walk all the way back to the Colosseum so he can bury the hatchet in that monstrosity's face. Suffice to say, the plot is purely there to add flavor and context to the adventure. It's an excuse to show a silly cutscene, to throw out a one-liner, and to justify Sam traveling to multiple locations. This time there's almost no Egypt, and instead you go from ancient Rome to ancient China and finally the mythical island of Atlantis, buried deep in the sea and loaded with Syrian technology. Bring a vomit bag. If you were to ask me where in the balls does Next Encounter sit in the Serious Sam timeline, then I would guess that it takes place after the first encounter, and sometime around the second half of Serious Sam Advance, in which Sam also visits Rome after another detour in Egypt. Safe to say that it's not canon, however, like for real, I think. Serious Sam 4 kinda put a wrench on that. When the classic Encounters were ported to the Xbox, a bunch of pre-rendered cutscenes were added, and this marked the shift in style and tone towards a bigger focus on being a cartoony superhero story. Next Encounter continues that trend, but I find it harmless compared to what came after it. The cutscenes are shoddily animated, and the jokes and references usually fall flat, but they are so short and the levels are long enough that it just serves as a cooldown between the action. Plus, just look at that perfectly chiseled chin. What a Chad. If you take it too far in that direction, you get Serious Sam 2, a game that frequently tries too hard to be funny to the point of causing second-hand embarrassment, otherwise known as cringe. Next Encounter doesn't try to be super dumb, nor does it try to be realistic like later games. Instead, it simply aims to recreate the feel of the classic Encounters, and visually at least, it mostly nails it. And man, this aesthetic is so good. The way it combines low-poly models with detailed textures painted in bright, vivid colors is just oomph, chef's kiss. It perfectly encapsulates the most beautiful parts of the architecture it's based on. Stuff like the wall patterns, or the floor tiles, or the decorative items. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, it's just the wide empty wastelands that don't hold up. Interior areas always look great, but then you have stuff like the vineyard, which is a big green dump followed by a big brown dump of a cavern, and finally an admittedly quite nice waterfall. The only thing that Next Encounter fails to properly imitate is the soundtrack, which is decent but doesn't stand out in the same way as the classics. Those games used appropriate instrumentation that perfectly captured the feel of each level, while Next Encounter relies a lot on generic electronic and hard rock. Now, I'm not sure how to say this without coming off as a massive jackass, but Next Encounter has some serious bootleg energy. And I hate using that word due to its negative connotations, because the game is pretty solid. Maybe a better way to describe it would be that it's some sort of uncanny valley effect, or uncanny Sammy, I suppose. Thanks for the click, by the way. The game uses a mix of old sound effects and new models, even though they are different weapons, and some enemies have designs that are identical to the classic encounters, while others might as well be a whole new enemy type. Oh, and they got the red and purple beheadeds mixed up. They mixed up the red and the purple. They mixed up the red and the purple. You might be surprised to learn that Next Encounter does not run on the Sirius engine, but rather Climax's own in-house engine, which may or may not have been designed specifically for first-person shooters. That at least might explain some of the quirks related to movement and physics. Stuff such as the Queer walking like they're sliding through the ground, or how the grenades and cannonballs have less upwards momentum and quickly drop like a rock, or how the green Reptiloid's balls awkwardly head towards the player in a straight line instead of flying around, while the Highlanders now cause an explosion with a radius far bigger than it looks. So let's talk gameplay. At its core, Next Encounter doesn't deviate too much from the formula established by its predecessors. It's an old-school FPS with health, armor, and ammo lying around, where you can carry every weapon at once and without worrying about reloading or accuracy. Progression is very straightforward, since the maps are usually separated into multiple combat arenas, with the occasional section requiring some light platforming or searching for a switch or a key. I mean, you've played video games. But there are some tweaks to the basic formula, starting with the health and armor overcharge mechanic. You can pick up extra health and armor all the way up to 200, but it will slowly drain down to the normal maximum of 100. You also always start with 100 health, regardless of what you ended the previous level with. Score also serves a practical purpose now. You get awarded medals at the end of each mission, and earning enough gold medals will unlock some cheats and the lost levels. These include standalone levels based on each of the 3 chapters, as well as a gallery with some concept art and photos of the development team. Next Encounter further separates itself from the classics with the Killing Streak bonus, which is triggered by killing 20 enemies in quick succession and boosts your damage and speed for a brief moment. This was also the first entry in the series to feature vehicles, which includes a Sirius Jeep with homing missiles and a combine harvester that mows enemies in its path and turns them into a pasty mess. Finally, there's the addition of multiple ammo types. Next Encounter brings back many of the classic weapons in some form or another, but they've been provided with new kinds of utility. Time for a quick rundown of the arsenal. The basic knife has been cut out entirely, and the chainsaw serves as the game's only melee weapon. Naturally, it's very situational, but when it works, you can just let enemies shave themselves on it. The Colt revolvers have been replaced by a pair of Deagles, and God bless them. They are a lot more effective thanks to having twice the ammo capacity and being semi-automatic. This lets them hold up a lot better late game, in some situations actually outperforming the dual Uzis due to their extended range. The shotguns were unified into one double-barreled shotgun, combining the high damage of the old coach gun with the faster speed of the single-barrel shotgun. The Tommy gun was replaced by the Uzis, which sound a bit weak, but are useful as a bullet hose. It packs ricochet bullets as secondary ammo, bouncing back when hitting surfaces. Not exactly useful in practice, but they at least serve as extra ammo. The minigun is your extra big bullet hose. It lost its infinite range, but it still fires super fast and with great accuracy. Hell, you don't even need to go to the trouble of aiming anymore, thanks to the new homing bullet ammo. Seriously, the damn things are relentless. Maybe a bit too much, given that they prioritize nearby targets above all else, even if you are targeting an enemy miles in the distance. The rocket launcher also got its own homing projectiles as an alternate ammo type, in addition to the regular rockets and the new sonic rockets. Despite the name, they aren't any faster than the normal ones. They simply have a bigger explosion radius and higher damage. The grenade launcher has a new appearance, but is otherwise identical aside from the different physics, again likely due to running on Climax's own engine, and its two secondary ammo types. One is limpet grenades, which stick to surfaces until its unfortunate victim gets too close, and the other is spider mines, which track nearby enemies and do a suicide attack against them. Both are in very short supply, however, so don't count on them. The flamethrower returns and does its job of setting things on fire and toasting them over time. But it also has a new liquid nitrogen ammo that freezes enemies and renders them prone to shattering. A shame that you barely get to play with it since there's so little ammo to be found, and doubly so for a third ammo type that I had no idea even existed. The laughing gas, which makes enemies laugh uncontrollably until they die. Well then, the sniper rifle also returns, and who greenlit this? It still has the quirk of being inaccurate and weak unless you're using the scope. But this time, it's even more powerful than a fully charged cannon shot. It's arguably the best weapon in the game, as it annihilates everything short of bosses and Highlander reptiloids, and even those just require 2 shots instead of 1. Ammo is a bit uncommon, but you do get enough to deal with high priority targets, such as major biomechanoids and Defo Stallions. Instead of the laser gun, you get the Syrian power gun, which projects a powerful beam with infinite range and perfect accuracy. It also has a secondary ammo type that charges up an energy ball that creates an explosion on impact. And again, I didn't know it existed until now. Finally, there's the good old cannon, which charges up and launches balls at very high speeds, though the balls themselves have been reduced in size, and its title of most powerful damage dealer was stolen by the sniper rifle. Curiously, none of the advanced weapons make an appearance, despite both games being developed in tandem and released on the same day. In the grand scale of things, Next Encounter never distances itself too much from what made the classic encounters what they were. The scale of the maps themselves and the quantity of enemies coming from all sides remains in place. The emphasis is less on the shooting itself and more on how you shoot, and how you move in order to avoid enemy attacks. Enemies come in many shapes and sizes with their own unique attack patterns, so you need to have a sense of spatial awareness to visualize where they are coming from, while also prioritizing the most important targets as you work down the enemy ranks. But while you're typically put on the defensive whenever a new wave appears, that's not always the case. The game knows when to let the player go on a power trip for a brief moment. Moments like those when you have a fully loaded minigun in a corridor full of distant, helpless enemies. Now that's the stuff. Of course, sometimes you also have moments where the game surrounds the player with a group of big reptiloids that shoot out explosive balls, with a giant radius that will inevitably hurt you to some degree. Moments that deserve to get launched into the sun. The issues with the gameplay typically come from these momentary frustrations with the level layouts or enemy behavior. Stuff that doesn't occur most of the time, but will occasionally show its ugly face to be mildly irritating. Things like cheap enemy placements that punish you for walking too far before you're supposed to, or the trippy stage layouts that make aiming more awkward than necessary. The most notable one is that kamikazes do not stagger when being shot. They are faster than the player, but also very fragile, so you're supposed to give them a light tap with the revolvers or the Tommy gun in order to stagger them and distance yourself before the killing blow. That's no longer possible in Next Encounter, so dealing with them is reduced to mindless shooting, since there's nothing you can do to escape the explosion once they're close enough. The game also has a pair of enemies with instant death cannonballs, because everyone loved those in Second Encounter. It's also a shame that difficulty levels don't alter the amount and type of enemies you face. Enemy waves are the same, just with different health and damage values. Still, Next Encounter is worth playing if you're a fan of the series but haven't touched it for one reason or another, like it being treated as the ugly stepchild and not being on PC, which is balls. The closest you get is a port of the Rome chapter over on the Serious Sam Revolution workshop. No, it doesn't include the Next Encounter enemies and weapons, but it's a fine set of levels on its own. There have also been efforts by fans to create their own HD remake, but it's a gargantuan task and progress has been slow over the past decade. We certainly won't be seeing an official one at this point, since presumably the rights to Next Encounter are split between Croteam and Take-Two. The good news is that it emulates very well on Dolphin. There's even a mouse injector that lets you play with mouse controls, though I haven't tested it myself. As for why I'm recommending the GameCube version over the PlayStation 2 version, it's because that one didn't get as much love, suffering from a number of technical downgrades that makes it really crummy by comparison. The big one is that it only runs at 30 FPS, but some assets are also lower resolution and the whole game has a washed out appearance due to the lighting and colors being much less vibrant. It's also missing hippie blood for some reason, and many sound effects are overly compressed and muddy. The only advantage that the PS2 version has is that it supports online multiplayer. But let's face it, you're not going to get any use out of that in this day and age. Climax might have fudged up at fans, but for a sweatshop cursed to make licensed crap for all eternity, 1 out of 2 isn't so bad. Next Encounter might have its share of problems, but it's a decent game in its own right, and it retained some of the energy that made me love the classic Encounters so much.